So we're currently located in the 1595 section. So this is the oldest bit that we have here, obviously at Boscobel. Originally, most houses would have had a central hearth, and you can imagine that fire in the centre, smoke going up through a hole in the top of the ceiling. Later on, you do get other varieties of kind of where they want to contain it. They want to contain that smoke. So you get something that's called a smoke bay, hence kind of bay windows. So houses were broken up into bays at a certain stage of this kind of, timber frame kind of design. And that itself would have been essentially a central section where your hearth would have been. You'd have had a wall either side of it, and that would have essentially just been like a smoke room in essence. That's where your heating would have been, that's where you'd have done your cooking, and that would have been, just a central smoke bay. What we have here, though, is a later alteration or a variation of that called a smoke hood. So you can kind of see on the timbers itself this, it looks like a modern day cooker hood. You've got your big triangle above your cooker, and it's doing exactly that. So rather than having, a walled section, the smoke bay, they've taken that wall away. And in this version, they've got essentially a big triangular section. At the very bottom of it, you'd have been able to, for example, have smoked meat in there. You'd be able to smoke things. You'd be able to cook underneath it. But essentially, it's going to channel that smoke going up through the top of the ceiling, and it's just getting rid of the smoke, really. You can see, obviously, the chars on the actual timbers themselves. You can see where it kind of finishes in this central section, just where the staircase is. And then that kind of gives you an idea when you go onto the lower floor of the dairy side. You can see, obviously, and imagine yourself being underneath that smoke hood and utilising that. The opposite side of that wall, which is now the Victorian entrance, that originally would have been open all the way from the ground floor to the top floor. And then on the dairy side, that's where they would have been, for example, your living accommodation, your scullery, various whatever you're doing. We do know then later on, obviously in 1624, this 1595 section then becomes a different purpose. So then we do get, obviously, if you look on the Victorian side in that kind of entrance, you can see the attic door. So we then know, once that attic door has been put in, this smoke hood, is that still being used? Probably not, because the door is now interfering with the smoke hood. So we're able to peel those layers back, and then we know that obviously things are changing. Then you're not necessarily maybe having to use the cooker in here or the smoke hood in here, because we've got basement kitchens. The family here, the Pendrels, are actually working it, and they're tenants. They're utilising it. They're cooking for whoever's here. They're going to use that more modern facility, and then obviously we then know that older section. We know that the attic door gets put in, and we know there is also a floored section and in that entrance. And if you look at the plans that we've got, the modern interpretation of it, we know at the front of the house there's that jutting off section. There's that kind of porch that would have been the front of the house, the front entrance coming into where the Pendrels are living in that 1595 section. So, yeah, you can kind of peel back those layers with that, really.
So do you think this was only used perhaps for a fairly short period of time?
It depends, because obviously we know it's 1595, and we know up until 1624, that's when the hunting lodge appears. So it's really difficult to say when it kind of changes over. My inclination would be more so, soon as 1624 comes around, or when they start building the hunting lodge, that's when you've got a proper change of usage with this house. It's going from then, let's call it a woodman's cottage or someone working here, to then going to, okay, we've got tenants properly living in. Also, everything's a bit not backwards, it sounds terrible in that sense, but it's more, this is an older type of building. They're not modernising it. They're just kind of doing little bits and bobs and adapting it. And probably also it'd be like changing your lifestyle. As a family, you get used to being here, or whoever lives here. You might not want that much change. You might just carry on with how you're living in it and what you're utilising. But the one thing we can be definite of is that when that attic door is put in, that smoke hood isn't being used because it's interfering with it. So there are certain things like that we can say. I mean, the timber, what I really like in here as well, above where you see the charred section, you can see a pigment line. So you can see where on this big top straight timber, where there's red dye, And a pigment line is basically just putting dye or some kind of stain onto a piece of string. Masons would have used it. Anyone that's kind of craftsman can still use them. And you hold it tight either side of that, ping it, and it gives you a straight line across your beam. So then that means then you've got something, a guideline, a level, a pigment line to kind of work to. So we've also got that alongside the chars in this bit of the building. And also we've got the opening for the door here as well. So you can see where...
the right-hand end.
Yeah, on the right-hand end, you can see where they've cut that out, which means at some point when they've floored the next section, there's probably two rooms in there, broken up into two rooms. Because the central timber which is there, which is probably from... let's call it the Fitzherberts, when they were here in the 1800s or late 1700s it would have been. We can see there's actually kind of grooves within that next door where the Watland door would have been. So you can see that the room's been separated into two.